Welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. Every month, we invite an expert to enlighten us on a topic related to our mission. Because Village TV videotapes these presentations, we can share that expertise with a larger audience. We hope you enjoy today's broadcast.
For those of you who might wonder how his visit came about, the connection is through the wife of last month's speaker, Tad Daly. Tad's wife, Kitty Felda, has worn many hats, one of which was public radio journalist. She was hoping we could put together an event featuring herself and Nick. When that did not work out, we were left with Nick's contact information and the knowledge that he lived in Laguna Niguel, and the result is obvious. Nick was born and raised in Southern California and got his start in radio at KUCI, UCI's student radio station. He has worked for several public radio stations, including KPCC or LS, where he spent 2 decades, half as the local host for All Things Considered. He still can be heard occasionally on LAist, as well as on his own podcast, Roman on the Radio. This is a program that features in-depth interviews with people associated with public radio, many working behind the scenes, for instance, writers, editors, and producers. I've given it a listen and I heartily recommend it. Roman on the Radio. You can get it anywhere you get your podcasts. Today, Mr. Roman is going to talk to us about his career, the challenges and rewards of a job in public broadcasting. We hope he will also tell us a bit about the effects of 2 sources of pressure on NPR today: technological innovations and the Trump administration. So please silence your phones and join me in giving Mr. Roman a warm welcome.
Look at that, it's me talking to a mic again. Like I haven't done this for 52 years. This I have not done. We used to have reel-to-reel tape and splicing blocks.
Can you hear him? No, they can't hear you. That's why I'm holding it, because
okay. How about now?
Yes.
All right, hang on a sec. Come on, Nick, you know how to use microphones. We used to have splicing blocks and so we could edit our reel-to-reel tape, and about year 1999, I discovered I could not see the splicing block anymore. I needed bifocals. Fortunately for me, that's when computers came in, and so I didn't need to worry about it anymore. The computer audio editing took care of that. But I want to thank you so much for letting me speak with you. Public radio has been a part of my life professionally for 44 years. Ever since I graduated from UCI, just down the street, and began freelancing for KSBR at Saddleback College. Back then they had a news department. And at the same time, I was working full-time at Sergeant Pepperoni's Pizza Store, which is right near the airport. Still there. They make good pizza. Still do. If you count my time as a student at KUCI at UC Irvine, it's 52 years. I was 18 when I got started. Was news director right away as a freshman. Here's why I have stayed in public radio as opposed to commercial radio. I love the creativity and the freedom, the willingness that we had to take chances, the camaraderie. We were teams at all the places I worked. I really liked that. I was a basketball player in high school, and I enjoyed the team aspect of things. I also like the fact that you could be a solo guy on a news story. One guy, one tape recorder, you did the story. You didn't need a video crew of 3 or 4 people. You were all by yourself, and so all the creativity came from you. And I really, really liked the sound. I liked the sound of voices. I felt that they carried so much in stories, and I liked to mix all that together and tell a story. It was just the most favorite thing I've ever done. It was spontaneous, it was surprising a lot of times, and it was often moving. That was a big deal too. People's voices would ring through. Larry Mantle and I have talked about this, that there's something about your voice on the radio. The audience gets to know us, and they feel like that we are their friend. People know things about me. I'm surprised. People will talk to me about Dodger baseball, because I've said on the air many times, I'm a big Dodger fan. They know that I live in Orange County. They know that I have 2 daughters. The voices coming out of speakers can do that. Larry feels the same way. So for a long time, that lower part of the radio dial, below 92, was kind of secret, is kind of scary. There was weird stuff going on there, below 92. And there were no commercials. And I loved it all. I really did. Public radio is not so secret anymore, and that's great. I've been looking for some facts and figures to tell you about. Inside Radio, which is a media publication, says the Nielsen ratings show that 8 of the top 10 news talk stations in the country, including 4 of the top 5, are non-commercial, listener-supported, featuring weekday and weekend programming from National Public Radio, along with local news and locally originated shows. In fact, my former home, LAist, is ranked 4th on that list. KCRW is ranked 8th, but you combine our audience, it's nearly 1 million people each week, 1 million people. The top of that list, by the way, is KQED in San Francisco. All of that is great if you're a big public radio station, like the ones I worked at, or like KQED, WBEZ in Chicago, WNYC in New York, WHYY in Philadelphia, GBH, WBUR in Boston, all those stations. But even for us, this is a rough time. And the decision by Congress to cut federal money for public broadcasting is just one of the challenges that we face. But there are others. So, here are public radio's top 3 biggest challenges as I see it. That loss of federal money, that's number 1 for smaller stations. KRVS in Lafayette, Louisiana. KTOO in Juneau, Alaska. Most of the stations with Blue Ridge Public Radio in Western North Carolina. Boise State Public Radio. Really, all the stations in the Alaska system, small tribal stations, it's number 1 for them. But for us, the bigger stations, it's really number 3 for us. KCRW, KQED, LAist, other stations in the big metro areas. We have large membership and development staffs that work to bring in support. They are smart, they are creative, and they work hard. And they have the staffing and the money to do the job that we need to bring in new money. The smaller stations do not have that. Nor do they have the big metropolitan areas with lots of rich supporters or potential supporters. We have that. When the pandemic hit, we had been working with a donor who was behind Kingston Technology. Carol, who was on our development staff at the time, had been working this man for 5 years. When the pandemic hit, and we lost a lot of money and a lot of support, especially from movie studios that would buy underwriting for us, that man gave us $1 million, just like that. And that sustained us through the pandemic. It was one of many things, but his money was great support. John Chu is his name. For the smaller stations, though, losing federal dollars is their biggest challenge. So make no mistake about that. But for all stations, big and small, there are two more challenges. And as I see it, they are actually the biggest ones for the bigger stations. And you can rank them 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. It's up to you. So one of the two is a drop in the number of listeners that the rapid growth of the internet. It means that listeners can listen to something else. They can listen to other stations from around the country. They can listen to podcasts or music, maybe audiobooks, whatever they want. We used to just have to worry about the stations in our area. Now we have thousands and thousands of competitors. And listeners can tailor the music that they listen to their taste, and we all do that. But the news and information, they can tailor that as well. You want your news to reflect your political beliefs. It is out there and you can find it. The one plus, and I'm not sure it balances out the challenge of thousands of other audio choices for people, but the one plus is that we can now draw in listeners from far outside our broadcast area by streaming on the internet. We can use it to our advantage. And the first time I realized this, the great advantage of streaming on the internet was about 30 years ago. I was at a journalism conference at Universal City, and I met a guy who had set up his computer to stream stations from around the country, and I was pretty impressed listening to it. But I was still skeptical about the audio quality. I wasn't sure that it was good enough for people to really want to listen to, at least from what I was hearing. So then he connected to a public radio station in Cincinnati that was playing classical music, and the sound was perfect. This was 30 years ago. And it was like one of those light bulb moments. I thought, oh my God, we got competition from everywhere now, and we didn't used to have to face that. So it's 30 years later. My friend Cheryl Duvall, who runs KRVS, the station at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, they play Cajun music, jazz and blues. Cheryl says they have a daily show each morning that's in French, since it's Cajun country, right? And she told me that she, because she's the boss, she can do this, tweak the broadcast schedule so that that program can air a second time at 3 in the morning. Why? Because there are listeners they have in Belgium who ask for it. And they're generous. And they give KRVS money. So she tweaked the schedule and put it on the air. KRVS lost about 12% of its budget when Congress cut federal funding. So if you can get more support from generous Belgian listeners, and all you have to do is switch your programming at 3 in the morning, you do it. But there's another big challenge, and that's our skill at running radio stations effectively, economically, and profitably. And you would think that that's a given. It is not, for a couple of reasons. First, the media world is changing so quickly that we have to make some educated guesses, and they are guesses about what's ahead for us. And we haven't yet found that sweet spot. Here's what I mean. Many stations, my own former home, LAS 89.3, made big bets that there was gold to be found at the end of the podcasting rainbow. We all did it. WNYC went into it big. NPR did as well. I mean, after all, podcasts were stories that were told in sound, right? And what are we good at? Telling stories in sound. It sounds perfect. But it wasn't. Because as the podcast world grew, 3 podcast genres tended to grab the greatest number of listeners, and we weren't very good at 2 of them. True crime, that's not our thing. And personality-driven talk, that's not our thing. So right now, Apple Podcasts lists Crime Junkie at number 2 show on its list of the top 10. And the Joe Rogan Experience is number 3. True crime and personality driven, both of them. We don't do that. Public broadcasters are good at the third popular podcast category, and that's news and information. And the Apple Podcast chart reflects that. NPR's Up First morning news podcast, it's number 4 on that list of 10. And the number 1 is, can you guess? The Daily from the New York Times. Number 1. Now these numbers move around a little bit, but it's been up there consistently for a long time. We air the Daily at my station at 3:30 in the afternoon. They cut it into a public radio version. Most stations do. Now, here's the thing about those 4 and most of the really popular podcasts. There are new episodes either weekly or daily, and to do that costs money. One of our former editors told me about the kind of hell that goes through at the Daily when there's breaking news late and they try and flip the show to get it on the air in the morning. It's madness. They work really hard on that show. Many public stations, like my former home, put a lot of money into podcasting. In fact, we even bought a building next to our Pasadena headquarters to host our growing LA Studios podcast unit. We hired producers and hosts and equipment. We refurbished the building. We turned out all kinds of podcasts, and that whole effort went nowhere. The podcasts were good. They won awards in many instances, but the revenue and the new listeners they brought in just did not justify the costs. Of course, maybe if we had just dipped a toe in the podcast waters instead of diving into the deep end, we might have made it work. And by the way, this was a sore point for many of us who were on air doing daily news work. We thought that this was not the best choice. We were reassured that it was fine. We were right, they were wrong. We weren't alone, though. WNYC in New York has cut back its podcast unit sharply. NPR has done the same. And here's something. The most listened to podcast that my station produced, LAist 89.3, and I'm very proud to say this, was the one that I did each day as our all things considered local host. It was called the LA Report. Suzanne Watley, who at the time was our morning edition local host, did a version for the morning. I did a version for the afternoon. The LA Report was consistently at the top of our podcast numbers month after month. Other podcasts we produced won awards. Suzanne and I won listeners. And all we did was repackage the daily stories that were done by our reporters. We would write some snappy copy. Suzanne and I are snappy copy experts. We kept it short. We're really good at that too. Maybe 6 or 7 minutes for the podcast. And out it went twice a day. Suzanne in the morning, me in the afternoon. Every month, we had double the listeners of any other podcast at LAist. And it also helped that we were two familiar voices, so listeners were comfortable with us. We were also the cheapest podcast to produce, and we were very proud of that. So when money troubles forced the station to wipe out nearly the entire podcast unit, our podcast survived, along with 2 others. Now one of those is gone. The other has been transformed from sound-rich storytelling to just an interview format. It's not the same as it was before. And in the meantime, the LA Report has now added a midday version with news host Nareda Moreno. So there are 3 LA Reports done each day out of my station. I'm really, really proud of that. I don't do them, but I'm proud that that one podcast that Suzanne and I were involved in from the beginning is the one that survived and is doing the best. Has a lot of advantages. All the voices are familiar, and we are there every day, every day, every day, every day. There's even a weekend version that Josie Wong does. That building, by the way, that we bought next to our own studios, the one we refurbished for our podcast unit, Marketplace is moving there. Yeah. They're going to do, Kai Rizdal and his buddies are going to do the show out of there. They had studios in downtown Los Angeles on 2nd and Figueroa. I remember when that Marketplace studio in downtown was built. It was built about 22 or 23 years ago. I saw it. They were still putting the framing up in those studios when I walked through it. Now, the other part of running a public radio station effectively is not wasting money on projects that you cannot afford. And I got an example for you. American Public Media Group, that's the parent company of Minnesota Public Radio, Marketplace, Southern California Public Radio, which, by the way, runs LAist. It bought a group of public radio stations in Florida, starting with a Miami station in 2007, 2 more in 2011 and 2012. Total cost $26 million. Turned the stations into what they called classical South Florida. They all lost money. $14 million total, until APMG sold off the whole thing in 2015. Sale price was a little less than $22 million. So we lost money on that one. Another mistake, this time by our friends at Capital Public Radio in Sacramento. Station decided to move its studios from Sacramento State, where they were, to downtown Sacramento, near the Capitol. It launched a capital campaign to buy space and refurbish the studios. Found a building, signed a lease. Turned out that a board member for Cap Radio was the wife of the man who was the partial owner of the building. Conflict of interest, Cap Radio stopped payments on that lease, decided to move to a different downtown location, and now there's lawsuits galore. Cap Radio also took over management of the public radio stations based at Chico State and Cal Poly Humboldt. The idea was to blanket much of Northern California with powerful radio presence based out of Sacramento. Then the pandemic hit, the expected revenue didn't show up, and Cap Radio has now canceled the management contracts. And at the same time, this one's weird, but it is happening. The former GM of Cap Radio is the subject of a criminal investigation that claims that he siphoned off about $370,000 of Cap Radio money for his personal use. Sacramento DA just got the case from the county sheriff, and they're pondering criminal charges. Now, okay, those three things in combination, that's pretty rare. But poor financial management, bad, weak leadership, that's not uncommon in public radio. NPR had its own history with that many years ago. I worked for 2 stations in my career that laid off nearly the entire staffs, including me, primarily because management just wasn't up to the task of making us stronger, better known, better supported. Even LAist 89.3 has lost about 40 people from either the news side or management over the last 2 calendar years from layoffs or buyouts. I was one of the buyouts. And so you add in the loss of federal support for public broadcasting, and you can see why it's a struggle for all of us. But it's a lot of nasty news. I am still optimistic about public broadcasting's future, and here are the reasons why. First, the commercial side of the broadcasting world, which used to rule the airwaves, as far as I'm concerned, it just plain stinks. It's awful. They've gone all out for cheaper national programming that lacks any local feel, kind of like broadcasting's version of non-fat milk, only not as tasty. Whether it's music or news, the broadcasts are packed with commercials. In fact, and I ran a stopwatch on this one time, the amount of time they spend on commercials each hour dwarfs the time that public radio spends on membership drives each hour. They are handing us listeners desperate for something interesting to listen to. It's like they said, we're not using these listeners. Do you want them? Yeah, we'll take them. Thanks. Second, I had expected this might happen, and it looks like it has. The kind of attention we got from the decision by Congress to yank federal support for public broadcasting turned out to be terrific publicity. We couldn't have bought it. The people I've talked to with stations across the country And the announcements I have seen all carry news about terrifically successful fall membership drives. Most stations ran an emergency drive when that decision came down. They're now finished up with their fall drives. You're going to get another one at the end of the fiscal year. We all do that, 3 days typically, telling you want a tax deduction, give to your local public radio station. Those drives, as far as I can tell, have brought in enough money to keep stations on the air for at least the next fiscal year. So that's good. Not all stations, travel stations are still hurting, but for many stations, that's great help. Everyone recognizes that the windfall might be, though, one-time money. So we won some sympathy this year. The question is, what happens next year? So it's up to us to decide that. Now, maybe next year will be fine. Many listeners might recognize that to get the programming they want, whether it's music, news, and information, they're going to have to support it with a few dollars, just like you support Netflix or Apple TV or whatever you have. We have to take advantage of that, and there are a lot of good ideas out there for how to keep those supporters in the fold. It's nice to see that a number of foundations have banded together to shore up the finances of the smaller stations. There was an announcement a few weeks ago about 8 foundations. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation was one, there were others, that have chipped in a total of about $36 million, all targeted for the smallest stations in the system. That's good. And then those little guys, they are doing really good work. I talked about Blue Ridge Public Radio, Western North Carolina, Boise State Public Radio, West Virginia Public Radio. Blue Ridge wins awards. Indiana Public Media won awards. They win awards for their news coverage, especially for coverage of local natural disasters or for local elections. They're really good at this. Commercial radio has abandoned those places, remote places. Local newspapers, you know, they're struggling. Sometimes they've stopped publishing. We've all seen a newspaper that's gone away. I was a newspaper boy when I was a kid. Monrovia Daily News Post, 106 papers in my area alone. That's gone. Public radio is stepping in as best it can, and it's doing great work. Can't do all of it, but it's doing great work. Here's another thing. Public radio stations are now much more willing to collaborate and cooperate, and that had been happening in small ways for many years. I was part of a statewide reporting group dating back to the early 80s. Later, my old station, KLON, now KKJZ, was the headquarters for CalNet. That was a daily 30-minute news program that aired on stations across California. It lasted 3 years, but has since been succeeded by the daily morning update, the California Report from KQED. There's also the California Newsroom, which brings together LAist, KPBS, KQED, KCRW, Cap Radio in Sacramento, and digital statewide news sites like CalMatters. In Texas, Texas Standard, that's the daily news program for public stations across the state, hosted by David Brown. Used to be at Marketplace, used to be my boss. Nice guy, real talented. Gulf States Newsroom brings together reporters and editors from stations in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. My former LAist colleague Priska Neely was the first managing editor at Gulf States. There are 7 newsroom groups like that that cover a total of 25 states across the country, banding together the small stations. Now, much of this was the result of the 2016 election of Donald Trump. Station managers and news directors realized they had missed something going on with much of the nation. We were missing stories. We didn't understand the needs of our own communities. And that helped push stations to change the focus of their reporting and to look more at what our listeners need and want rather than what leaders are saying and doing every day. It's a switch in philosophy. One term for it is solutions journalism. It's where you look not just at what the problem is, but what the possible fixes are as well. We have not perfected it yet. There's still a lot of DC focus on our reporting, fair amount of horse race journalism, stories being framed about how something affects this potential candidate or that one, who has an edge in the political polls. That stuff dominates CNN, Fox News, MS Now. NPR is doing less of it, partly because stations complained, and there is still less on public radio local stations. At LAist, we do very little of that. And there's this. Many of my friends in public radio have gone from reporting and editing to teaching newsrooms how to connect better with their listeners and how to find the station, how the stations, teach the stations what they want and what they need to hear. They get talking to their listeners. Priska Neely, I mentioned her. She has left Gulf States. She's now the training manager for Report for America, which guides reporters in newsrooms around the country on how to do their work better. Altavo's Lab does the same with reporters who work in places with listeners and readers that have typically been passed over by big media outlets. Other reasons to be optimistic. Do you know about Alex Curley's website, Adopt a Station? Good, I'll tell you. It tells you how much your local station is and how much money, how much it lost in federal dollars. It gives you a website where you can donate. You can find any station in the country, in any state. He has a percentage of what they lost in their budget. It's how come I know that at KRVS, where my friend Cheryl is the manager, lost 12% of its budget. It also gives you a website where you can donate, so money can come in from around the country. WNYC in New York, which produces Radio Lab and other public radio programs, is offering those programs free of charge to stations that have lost a significant percentage of their support when Congress killed off federal money for public broadcasting. And some of you might have seen John Oliver on This Week Tonight. Anybody see that? Oh, that was something. On This Week Tonight, he gave a shout out to public broadcasting a few weeks back, including a note about KTOO in Alaska that won awards for investigative reporting about food stamp snafus in that state. I talked to the managing editor in my podcast. Her name is Claire Strempel. I've known Claire since she was a little girl because she is the daughter of my high school girlfriend. Yeah, see how it comes around? And she told me the kind of work that they were doing. She also told me what it was like at her station the day after Congress passed that. It's a pretty moving podcast if you could find it. You should be able to. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. John Oliver also launched an auction of some of the weird items that his show has collected over the years, including a painting by the late artist Bob Ross of public TV fame. You know Bob? That auction raised $1.5 million for small stations that have been hurt the most by the loss of federal support. John Oliver, $1.5 million. It was something. Oh, and one more thing. Now that Congress has stepped away from federal support from public broadcasting, there is no more debate point. So they can complain about what we do, but they now have nothing to hold over our heads. Whatever success we have now belongs to us and our listeners. It's ours. So, solutions journalism. What can you do? Well, you can support public broadcasting, but you can also get your kids to support it. Remember, they sat in the back seat while you drove them around and you had Morning Edition on and All Things Considered on the radio. Mom, do we have to listen? Yes, we do. You can encourage them to get into that giving habit, and then you tell your friends and your neighbors about what you heard. You help them download and use the app. I was busy with that tonight. Nearly every station has an app where you could stream it. And I want you to keep listening to LAist or KCRW or the SoCal Sound or KUSC. They are all good and they all deserve your support. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the talk. I was doing some research and I saw that KPFK, which is also listener-sponsored, their CEO makes about, or general manager, which is the equivalent, makes about 60 to 80,000 a year.
Correct.
Whereas LAist is about $500,000.
Yeah.
Could you go into those on why such a big difference between the two? Thank you.
They are solely listener-supported. And in some cases, they actually barely show up on the ratings, so they don't have a lot of listeners to support them. We do. And we have extremely talented people. KPFK has been in a world of hurt for about 30 years. And that's one of the problems. There have been constant changes in management, constant programming changes. I haven't listened to it for a long time, so I can't speak to it, but I do know that their finances are nowhere close to ours. And that's the main difference. I wish it was different. They have a gigantic signal. But unfortunately, their operation is chaotic. And that's too bad. It's not like that at some other Pacifica stations. Pacifica limited itself to listener donations only, so no underwriting, none of the rest of that. And so it gets very difficult for them.
I know you mentioned that there was a way to donate to the rural stations.
Right.
Could you say that again?
Yeah. adoptastation.org. Alex Curley used to work at NPR, set that site up almost immediately. And he did tremendous work going through the finances of, God, I don't even know how many stations, like literally a couple hundred, to find out what was in their public files for their fiscal years that ended. I think he started with 23, and he's updating it as he goes, and made estimates as to how much money they were going to lose and put it in a percentage, and then found the website and added links. So when you go to, I was on it today, if you go to adoptastation.org, all one word, adoptastation.org, then you get to pick the state that you're looking for. And then you can examine all the stations in that state. There's a link to the website, so if you're unsure, maybe you don't want to support him, you want to listen to him first, you can do that. I would, and decide if you think the programming has value, and then support it. And on my podcast, I say start with $25. And it would make it a one-time thing. If you really like a station, like I like KRVS because my friend runs it, so I support them. And I sent money to KTOO in Juneau, Alaska, because I like them. You're very welcome. And I support the SoCal Sound because Julie Slater, who's on air in middays, is a friend of mine. So I support the stations that I know need help, the ones that I like. But you have your own choice, you make your own choices.
Nick?
Yeah. Where are you? Okay.
Can we expect to see public radio become more aggressive in protecting our First Amendment rights, being willing to take on the suppression of freedom of expression now that you're out from under public funding? I was just reading about how the owners of social media, who are all good friends of the president, they've instituted all kinds of algorithms to suppress certain types of news
Yeah.
on the social media. So can public radio pick up that?
Well, we do, we're not going to be, we still have to be careful about editorializing on air. We don't do that. We should not do that. We also have license holders, which are mostly universities around the country, or community groups that hold our licenses. So we have to avoid, advocating, wildly. But NPR, all things considered, Morning Edition, has, at least as far as I can tell, has always been an advocate for free speech and will report fairly on anything that's happening with the federal government, but also with local governments too. So I don't think that public stations are going to be holding banners, and what they're going to do is they're going to uphold journalism and freedom, journalistic freedom as much as possible. So that I don't think is going to change. But what we really need is for us to do good work on educating the audience on elections and the stakes of elections, on what policies will actually mean to individuals. We'll do all of that. I hope that answers your question. But we will be careful about playing any, we're not going to say get rid of the president. That's not our job. That's the voters. The voters make those decisions, not us. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
That I've been listening to NPR since I grew up in Michigan. And
Yeah.
all I want to know is how, because I'm Indian, so I know English, but how about other people who speak Spanish or minorities? What kind of NPR do you have for them to get them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not familiar with what we have. Some stations do have Spanish language services. It's certainly a big part of stations throughout the Southwest. In Arizona, I'm pretty sure there is, and other places. But there's a lack there that we could fill. I mean, BBC, that's part of what they do. I mean, they do hundreds and I think like 100 language systems. But we don't have the kind of support that, say, BBC does. BBC gets a license for everyone in Great Britain. That's not what we have. We have basically volunteer donations from individuals. But it's a good idea. Yeah.
Hi, yes, really enjoyed your speech.
Thank you.
Let's see, lifelong LAS listener, been with
Yeah.
my family actually, my mother and my
Yeah.
auntie. Increased our donation to $25 a month.
Great.
Because of the NPR loss.
Good.
Wanted to share that in this area, we get great reception in the car,
Right.
but not actually in the house.
Yeah.
And that's caused me to look into streaming.
Yeah.
And I haven't tried the LAS app.
Oh, you should.
But,
You'll get it.
What I've been looking for is an open source app, to make sure, have a special telemetry. And something that would do a DVR type functionality where you could say, oh, this is a great segment, I want to record it or capture it or reference it some way.
Yeah.
So anyway, just your thoughts on all this.
Well, we do archive our programming. I know that. The recording part, I mean, you can find playbacks on the website. because we have that. When I'm on air talking baseball with Larry, I always go back and I listen to I replay it off the app for two reasons. One, I want to make sure I sounded good. And for another, listening to me on the radio has always been a lot of fun. But I think the kind of technology and thing that you're looking for, I don't know if that's something that we would provide. We have worked, I know that the station has worked hard to have it so that you could tell Alexa to play us, for example, if you had Alexa. But I don't know where those things stand. It took them forever to update the app. I was pretty mad about that. But they finally did. And then streaming services like TuneIn, they'll have it. You can stream it off the website. You can stream most stations anyway. And if you go to the NPR site and enter the call letters of any station in the country, you can stream it, easy. So that's the best I can tell you. But, you know, in terms of recording, see, I'm pretty adept at all of this, so it's easy for me, but not everybody's got the kind of gear I've got. Yeah,
I was very happy with KPCC,
yeah.
and then one day LAS came along.
Libby, yeah, and you don't like it.
One of my questions would be, who thought of that crazy name, that even your AI transcriber has a dozen shots that usually Elias comes up.
Yeah,
And I thought I understood that what happened was it became a corporation.
no.
LAS, and there was
No.
three, well, here's what I thought. The whole, all of it's out in case of, that it was the KPCC, eventually they stopped taking checks to that. You can only contribute to LAS. And then there was a website, and then there was a podcast, like there were three entities that came together. So what's the story?
Public radio stations for a long time didn't rebrand themselves. We carried the call letters of the place that we were. So KUSC is KUSC, right? KVPR, that's Valley Public Radio. We had KPCC. Were any of you rock and roll fans in the late 60s listening to FM radio? There was a station on the air, the first freeform FM rock station, KPPC, Pasadena Presbyterian Church, right? They played religious music and sermons on the AM side. The FM side, they weren't doing anything with it. So a bunch of San Francisco hippies, this is true. Tom Donahue was the guy's name, and his wife, Rachel Donahue. You might remember Rachel. She used to do breakfast with the Beatles on KLOS for a long time. They came down and they said, hey, can we use your FM signal? We'll pay you X amount of money. And the church said, yeah, sure. So they set up in the basement of the Pasadena Presbyterian Church, which I think was on Colorado. And they played, it was wild. I was a teenager, and I listened with Jeff Gonzer and the obscene Stephen Clean and Outrageous Nevada and all these people playing the weirdest stuff. And it was, for a kid, it was great. I have friends today who think that I worked there. And I said, no, it's KPCC, not KPPC. They still don't get it. Anyway, PCC was also difficult to say on air. I used to get notes from people saying, why do you say KPCC? Why don't you say KPCC? And the reason I didn't say it like that is because if I smoosh the call letters, like if you're on air, that's the worst thing you can do is blow your call letters. And knew I would blow them. But also, station management at the time felt that that nobody knew what PCC meant. I mean, if you live in, we did, but a lot of people didn't. And we were more than just a Pasadena radio station. So they set out to rebrand us. And we had purchased a website called LAist at the urging of WNYC in New York, because they had, the guy who owned all the ISTs websites, there was LAist, there was Gothamist, there was DCist in Washington, D.C. He just up and stopped running them. They had, it was sort of like the free press on the internet, you know? They had a lot of, well, not exactly, I guess, entertainment reviews, movie reviews, restaurant reviews, weird stories. It was pretty strange. And he just up and got out of the biz and sold off all those websites, and WNYC bought Gothamist and decided that they were going to try, and each of those websites had a collection of digital fans that they had, established digital fans who were not public radio listeners. And our digital side, our news sites on our kpcc.org website was not drawing clicks. So we bought that, hoping to transform it. When they were looking to rebrand us, and they could have rebranded us as anything, we were told that they did a audience survey and found that LAist scored the highest of these suggested. I didn't buy it for a second. I mean, I could teach a focus group to call us hot dog radio if I really wanted to. So I felt that they had just snowed us, that what they had really done is they had taken the cheapest name, and the one that we owned, and decided to rebrand that way. You are not alone in telling me that you hate that name. I was in line way before you were. In fact, Suzanne Watley was number 1 and I was number 2, because we thought we couldn't say it on air. We would smush it. But they went ahead and did it. We all added LAist 89.3 to help a little bit, but that was basically it. I think they went cheap. This is my opinion. I don't have anything to back it up. I never saw what the other suggestions were. I do know that other stations have rebranded themselves. KWMU in St. Louis, for example, they are now St. Louis Public Radio. Works for them. The best one that I saw something written about this not long ago, was KQED in San Francisco. On air, KQED used to call itself KQED Public Radio. But they have realized that there's really not much news and information broadcast competition for them. So they have now rebranded themselves as KQED News, and their listenership went up. Pretty smart. I got to give them credit for that. I wish we had done something smart like that, but we didn't. KCRW seems to be fine with being KCRW. And other stations have rebranded, and many stations in smaller states have rebranded themselves under an umbrella. Texas Public Radio, for example, St. Louis Public Radio, like I said. Boise State Public Radio, which is actually like 19 signals. Blue Ridge in Western North Carolina, I think that's like 17 signals. Vermont Public Radio. So they're all under that kind of a emblem. California's a little too big. We couldn't really call ourselves California Public Radio. That was already taken anyway. So we went with LAist. I don't like it. I thought we could have done better, but that was basically it. It was that. Rebrandings happen, and a lot of times they don't work. And I don't think ours did. Others have, but I don't think ours did. That's just me. Yeah,
When I lived in a small community in Iowa, I got used to the syndicated NPR programs.
yeah,
Calling All Pets, I think, was one.
Yeah.
The People's Pharmacy was another.
yeah.
And then when I moved to a bigger metro area such as here or in San Diego, I couldn't find these programs at all. Is that because they went under or the smaller stations used them as fillers?
Some of those programs might have been, do you know if they were locally produced?
No, they were national.
They were national. Sometimes programs go away. I freelanced for a sports show called Only a Game, and it was on air out of WBUR in Boston, distributed nationally by NPR, 27 years. Pandemic hit, and that show went away. It's too bad. It was a really good show. But shows come and shows go. It may have not had enough of an audience. You might want to go check with that station's website and look at their schedule and see if that show is still on air. If it is, they probably break it out individually and you can listen to it. Or you can just do a search on the title of the show. If not, there's probably, almost certainly, a podcast that's doing the same thing or close to it. And you might be able to find your favorites there. That's the best I can tell you. Yeah.
Hi, this sounds dumb, but I don't know how to get a streaming app. I don't know.
Do you have an iPhone?
What?
Do you have an iPhone?
Yes.
Do you have it with you? Talk to me later.
I don't want to take everybody's time.
I'll download it for you and show you how it works. They're pretty easy, and it's a marvelous thing. I mean, you can listen. I can listen to WWOZ in New Orleans, maybe the most famous jazz and blues public radio station in America. And they stream all the time. Every public station, public radio wasn't so worried about making any money because we already weren't making any money. So we just said, give it away, come on. And usually you're affiliated with a university, which I like to call University of Smart Guys, and you just get a couple of smart guys in there and have them work up an app. I mean, my old college station, KUCI's got an app. I can stream UCI basketball on the radio if I want to. So, anyway.